On Labor Day weekend, at 4:52 in the morning, I was standing on the tarmac at Aviano Air Base with a 72-pound rucksack cutting into my shoulders and 27 hours without sleep pressing behind my eyes. I checked my phone, expecting something simple, something human, and instead, I got a single message from my stepmother that read, "You are not welcome at this house anymore. Do not come." I stared at it long enough for the letters to feel like they were rearranging themselves. Then I typed one word: received. If you've ever been cut off by someone who still expected to benefit from you, I want you to stay with me for this. Subscribe, leave a comment, tell me where you're watching from. Because what happened next didn't start at that text. It started years earlier, in a quiet decision that put my name on something they thought I didn't understand. My name is Marissa Cole. I'm 31 years old, a staff sergeant in the United States Air Force, and this is the last time my family mistook my silence for weakness. I sat down on a cold metal bench near the loading area and opened my laptop. Not to argue, not to call, to move. But before I tell you what I did in that moment, you need to understand how my name ended up on the paperwork they were trying to erase me from. Because none of this makes sense without that. I grew up in Fayetteville, North Carolina, a town where people track your life by where you park your car and who you wave to at the grocery store. My parents divorced when I was 9. Not dramatic, no slammed doors, just a quiet separation that left everything feeling slightly off-center. My mom moved into a 2-bedroom apartment near Skibo Road. My dad, Daniel Cole, kept the house on Winding Creek. I split time between them until I didn't. By 16, I was mostly staying with my mom. Not because of anything explosive, just distance. The kind that grows without anyone announcing it. When I was 18, my dad married Angela Cole. And I want to be precise here. Angela didn't walk in and destroy anything. She reorganized it. There's a difference. She had systems, schedules, a way of speaking that made everything sound reasonable while quietly shifting where you stood in the room. At first, I was still part of the structure. Then I became someone who visited. Then someone who needed to check first. Then someone who just stopped being included. You don't notice the exact moment it happens. You just feel it when it's already done. I enlisted at 20, not because I was running, because it was the clearest path forward I could see. Steady income, structure, a way to build something that didn't depend on being invited into it. I did well. Promotions came. Deployments came. Life moved. And for a while, I kept calling home. That part didn't last. 4 years ago, my dad called me out of nowhere. Not to ask how I was, not to check in. He called because he needed something. He and Angela wanted to buy a new house. Not the old one on Winding Creek. A bigger place, better neighborhood. Closer to the private school Angela had picked out for my younger half-sister, Lila. The issue wasn't the house, it was their numbers. Dad's credit score was sitting around 645. Angela's business, a small boutique she'd opened in 2021, looked good from the outside, but didn't show enough stable income on paper. The loan offers they were getting came in at 7.2%. Too high, too expensive long-term. 2 days later, I got a call from someone else, my aunt, Rebecca Dawson, Dad's older sister, a real estate broker with 25 years in the business. The kind of woman who doesn't waste words and doesn't leave things unclear. If you come on as co-borrower, she said, your credit pulls that rate down to about 4.6%. That saves them close to $90,000 over the life of the loan. She paused. You'd also be listed on the deed. Partial ownership. Not symbolic. Legal. She explained everything. Liability, credit exposure, equity, what I stood to gain, what I stood to lose. She gave me 5 days to decide. I said yes on day 3. Not because I trusted them, because I understood leverage. If my name was on that property, I wasn't just family. I was a party to a contract. We closed in April. Purchase price, $265,000. My ownership stake, 35%. At the same time, I set up an automatic transfer, $900 a month, pulled directly from my military pay, sent into the joint account tied to the mortgage. It covered just under half the monthly payment. Every month. No reminders, no missed payments. Clean, documented, traceable. Beckham kept copies of everything. At the time, I didn't think I'd ever need them. That was my first mistake. The first year, my dad called twice. Quick conversations, grateful tone. We should catch up more. We didn't. By year 2, the calls stopped. By year 3, the silence felt normal. And every month, the $900 still went out. Automatic. Like a bill. Like something I owed. Tell me honestly, if you were in my place, would you have kept sending that money without hearing from them? Because I did. For 46 straight months. That's $41,400. And during that time, something else was happening. Something I didn't see, because I wasn't there. My grandmother, Evelyn Cole, lived with them part-time. She was 81. Sharp, observant, but not someone who handled phones or messages herself. She depended on whoever picked up. I called that house dozens of times over 4 years. Angela answered most of them. She's resting. She just fell asleep. I'll tell her you called. I believed her, every single time. Until I didn't. My younger sister Lila texted me once, just once, 2 years ago, asking if I was coming for Thanksgiving. I replied within 10 minutes. Angela saw the message, took the phone, deleted the thread. I didn't know that then. I know it now. And my dad? He told extended family I had drifted, that I was too busy, that I didn't reach out anymore. And here's the thing about a lie repeated calmly enough. It becomes the version everyone accepts. No one checks. No one questions. It just settles. 6 months before that Labor Day morning, my dad sat down with a real estate agent. Her name was Cynthia Hale, Keller Williams' office in Fayetteville. I didn't know this at the time. I know it now because of what happened next. The market had shifted. The house they bought for $265,000 was now estimated around $390,000. There was equity sitting there. Real money. Angela's boutique was struggling. Behind on rent, inventory debt stacking. Lila's school tuition increasing. They needed cash. The simplest option? Sell the house. Start over. Clear debts. Reset. There was only one problem. My name. They couldn't sell without me. Legally, I had to sign. So instead of calling me, instead of offering a buyout, instead of doing it clean, they made a different plan. One that required me to stay away, stay uninformed, stay quiet. That text on Labor Day morning, that wasn't emotion. It was strategy. Angela wrote it. My dad sent it. They thought distance would slow me down. They thought I wouldn't know what my share was worth. They thought wrong. Back on that bench in Aviano, I didn't call. I didn't argue. I didn't react. I opened my military pay account, scrolled to the allotments, and canceled the $900 transfer. 1 click. Confirmation screen. Confirmed. 4 years of automatic payments, stopped in under 10 seconds. Then I opened a blank document and started typing. An equity inquiry request. Formal, neutral, legal. It took me 12 minutes. I sent it directly to the mortgage lender at 5:26 a.m. No threats, no accusations. Just a co-owner asking for a current valuation. That's it. But here's what they didn't realize. That one email triggers something. The lender is legally required to notify all borrowers, which meant within hours, my father would know. But he wouldn't know what I was planning next, and that uncertainty, that's where everything started to break. Within 48 hours, there were 9 missed calls on his phone. One of them wasn't from me. It was from an attorney, and everything he thought he had under control started to shift. But what he still didn't know was this. I was already on my way home, and I hadn't told a single person. Not him, not Angela, not even my sister. So let me ask you something before we continue. If someone told you not to come home, would you listen? Or would you show up anyway? Because what happened when I rang that doorbell? That's where the real story begins. At 6:10 that same morning, I was still sitting on that metal bench at Aviano, watching cargo crews move like shadows under floodlights, when my phone buzzed for the first time. Dad. I let it ring. Then again. And again. By the fourth call, I turned the phone face down beside me and took a slow breath. 9 years in the military teaches you something most people never really learn. Not every move needs to be loud to be effective. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is nothing at all. If you've ever had someone panic the moment they realized they couldn't control you anymore, you already know what comes next. Comment yes if you've seen that shift happen in real life. I picked up the phone on the 6th call, not because I wanted to talk, because timing matters. Marissa, what the hell did you just send to the lender? His voice wasn't angry, not yet. It was tight, controlled, the kind of control that cracks under pressure. I kept my voice level. I requested my equity position. You blindsided me. No, I said. I asked for information tied to a contract with my name on it. A pause. You could have called first. I could have. Another pause. But I didn't. Silence stretched just long enough to feel uncomfortable. Then he shifted. Angela is trying to figure out what this means. You've complicated things. I almost smiled at that. Complicated. That word people use when they mean they've lost control. What exactly have I complicated, Dad? He didn't answer immediately, because answering that question would mean saying the quiet part out loud, that they were trying to sell the house, without me. We were just exploring options. There it was. Careful. Vague. Not technically a lie, but not the truth either. Are you listing the house? Another pause. That's not finalized, which means yes. He exhaled. Marissa, listen. We were going to talk to you. When? Soon. Define soon. No answer. Exactly. I shifted my rucksack off one shoulder and leaned forward slightly, grounding myself. If you want to sell, sell, I said. But my share gets handled properly. Angela thinks I'm not discussing this through Angela. That landed. Harder than anything else I'd said. Another silence, longer this time. Then his voice changed. Lower, more familiar, more dangerous. You're overreacting. No, I'm responding. You don't even live here. That's true, but my name does. That was the first crack. You could hear it, not in what he said, in what he didn't. I need you to cancel that inquiry, he said. No. Marissa, no. Flat, final. That was the second crack. His tone sharpened. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I didn't answer right away, because sometimes silence forces people to show more of themselves than words ever will. And right on cue, he did. Angela said this is exactly why we didn't want to involve you directly. There it was, not even hidden anymore. I let that sit between us for 2 full seconds. Then I said quietly, You already involved me the moment you put my name on that mortgage. And I ended the call. I didn't block him. I didn't need to. He was going to call again. People like him always do when they feel control slipping. But here's what he didn't know. I had already moved past the conversation stage. My flight was in 3 hours. And unlike them, I don't make moves I'm not prepared to follow through on. The terminal started filling up as boarding time got closer. Soldiers laughing louder than necessary. Phone calls to families. The kind of energy that comes from relief. Across from me, a guy about my age had his phone propped up on his duffel, talking to his wife and kid. The kid was holding up a drawing, bright colors, messy lines. The kind of thing you don't throw away. I watched for maybe 10 seconds, then looked back at my phone. No messages from my family. Not even from Lila. And for the first time that morning, something shifted. Not anger, not sadness. Clarity. There's a moment when you realize you've been holding on to something that stopped holding on to you a long time ago. That moment doesn't feel dramatic. It feels quiet, clean, like setting something down you didn't realize was heavy. Boarding started. I grabbed my bag and stepped into line. Seat 18A, window. I didn't choose it for the view. I chose it because it gave me space to think. Once we were in the air, I pulled out my laptop again. Not for work, for strategy. Because this wasn't about emotion anymore. This was about position. Step 1 was already done. Cancel the allotment. Stop the money. Step 2, force visibility. The equity inquiry would trigger lender notification, which meant paperwork, which meant documentation, which meant a record. Step 3, I opened my contacts and scrolled. Rebecca Dawson. I hadn't called her in over a year. Not because of anything bad, just distance. I tapped the number. She picked up on the second ring. Marissa. No surprise, just acknowledgement. Aunt Rebecca, I said. I need your help. A pause. Then her voice shifted slightly, more focused. What's going on? I gave her the short version. Not emotional, just facts. Co-borrower. Equity inquiry sent. Possible unauthorized listing. Silence on her end for a few seconds. Then, good. That caught me off guard. Good. Yes, her tone was calm. You moved first. Most people wait too long. I leaned back slightly in my seat. What do I need to do next? 2 things. Her voice sharpened just a little. 1, do not sign anything. Not electronically, not in person, not casually. Understood. 2, I want you physically present before anything else happens. I am. Another pause. You're already on your way, aren't you? Yes. A small exhale. That's my niece. There was something in her voice I hadn't heard in years. Not pride exactly. Recognition. When do you land? Tonight. Raleigh. Drive to Fayetteville after. Good. I'll pull copies of everything. Original closing, loan structure, payment history. And Marissa. Yeah? Her tone dropped slightly. They're going to try to make this emotional. Don't let them. I won't. This is business now. Exactly. She hung up. No extra words, no reassurance, just alignment. And that was all I needed. The rest of the flight passed in quiet. Not empty. Focused. I reviewed numbers in my head. $265,000 purchase price. Estimated value near $390,000. Rough equity after balance. My share wasn't small, not even close, and they knew that. Which meant one thing. This wasn't about convenience. This was about cutting me out before I realized what I had. When we landed in Raleigh, it was already dark. I grabbed my bag, walked through the terminal, and picked up a rental car. Black Nissan Altima. Nothing memorable. That's how I like it. The drive to Fayetteville was just under an hour. Highway lights stretching out ahead, radio off. Just the sound of the engine and the road. And my thoughts. I passed exits I recognized. Restaurants I'd been to years ago. Places that felt familiar in a distant way, like looking at an old photo of someone you used to know. I didn't go straight to the house. I pulled into a motel about 3 miles away, paid cash, 1 night, no questions, because I wasn't showing up unprepared. Not this time. Inside the room, I set my bag down and sat on the edge of the bed. Still. Quiet. Then I pulled out my phone. 9 missed calls from Dad. 2 from an unknown number. 1 voicemail. I didn't listen to it. Not yet. Instead, I opened my messages, scrolled to Lila's name, typed. Are you home tomorrow? I stared at the screen for a second, then hit send. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Yeah, why? I didn't answer right away. Because some moves are more effective when they land in person. I set the phone down, lay back on the bed, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow was Labor Day, family dinner. They thought I wasn't coming. They planned everything around that. And in less than 24 hours, I was going to walk through that front door, unannounced, uninvited, and fully aware of exactly what they'd been trying to do behind my back. But here's the part none of them were ready for. I wasn't coming to argue. I was coming with leverage. And what I had in my bag was something they had no idea existed. Something that would change the entire conversation the moment it hit the table. But I didn't take it out yet. Not even then. Because timing matters. And tomorrow, timing was going to be everything. At 11:07 on Labor Day morning, I was sitting in a rental car 2 houses down from the place I had been paying for, holding a folder in my lap that no one inside that house knew existed. The front yard looked better than I remembered. Fresh mulch, new white stones lining the flower beds, a flag mounted near the garage that hadn't been there before. Everything clean, maintained, curated. It almost made you forget who had been paying for it. I turned off the engine and sat there for a second, not hesitating, calibrating. If you've ever walked into a room knowing you were about to shift the entire dynamic, you know that feeling. Not fear, not anger. Precision. Before I got out, I checked my phone. One new message. Lila, are you coming over? I didn't answer, because I already was. I stepped out of the car, adjusted my jacket, and picked up the folder. Inside it were 3 things. A printed history of every single $900 transfer I had made over 46 months. A copy of the original closing agreement with my name clearly listed as co-owner. And something else, something newer, something they absolutely were not expecting. I walked up the driveway slowly, the same driveway I had shoveled snow from at 15, the same front door I used to walk through without thinking. Funny how a place can stay the same and still feel completely different. I rang the doorbell at 11:12. Voices inside, movement, then footsteps. The door opened. Lila stood there, 20 now, older, but still carrying that same softness she had as a kid. Her eyes widened immediately. Marissa? Hey, Lyle. She didn't move for a second, like her brain hadn't caught up yet. Then quietly, You're here. Yeah. She stepped back without saying anything else. Not inviting, not blocking. Just adjusting. I walked in. The smell hit first. Roasted chicken, garlic, something sweet baking in the oven. Labor Day lunch. Normal, carefully normal. Angela appeared in the kitchen doorway before I reached the living room. She was holding a dish towel. Her expression didn't change. Not shock, not anger. Stillness. The kind that takes effort. Marissa. Not a question, a statement. Hi, Angela. Her eyes flicked briefly to the folder in my hand, then back to my face. You weren't supposed to come. I know. I kept my voice even. I didn't come for you. That landed exactly how I intended it to. Footsteps behind me. Dad. He stopped about 6 feet away, like there was an invisible line between us. I told you not to come. You did. A beat. And I came anyway. Silence. The air shifted. Not loud, but noticeable. From the living room, a softer voice. Marissa? I turned. Grandma Evelyn was sitting in her usual chair by the window, smaller than I remembered. Thinner, but her eyes, still sharp. I walked past both of them without waiting, knelt down in front of her. Hi, Grandma. She reached for my face with both hands, like she needed to confirm I was real. You came. Of course I did. Her fingers tightened slightly. I thought... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I glanced up briefly. Angela was watching, and for the first time, something in her expression cracked, just slightly. Confusion. because this wasn't going how she planned. Good. We moved into the dining room a few minutes later. The table was already set. 6 seats, plates aligned, glasses filled, everything in place. Except me. That part hadn't been planned. Dad took his seat at the head, Angela to his right, Lila across from me, Grandma beside me. I placed the folder next to my plate, not opening it. Not yet. Timing. They tried to continue like normal. Small talk, food, routine. Angela asked Lila about school. Dad made a comment about the weather, but it felt forced, like everyone knew something was coming. They just didn't know when. We got halfway through the meal before Dad cleared his throat. Marissa. There it is. We need to talk about what you did. I set my fork down calmly. What did I do? You contacted the lender. I nodded. Yes. Without discussing it with us first. I tilted my head slightly. You mean without asking permission? His jaw tightened. That's not what I said. That's what you meant. Angela stepped in. Smooth, controlled. Marissa, we were handling this. Handling what? A pause. Then, the house. There it is, out loud now, finally. I leaned back slightly in my chair. You're selling it. Dad exhaled. We were considering it. No, you were listing it, without telling me. Angela's tone sharpened just a fraction. You don't live here. That again. I looked directly at her. But my name does. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Lila looked between us, confused. Grandma Evelyn stayed very still, watching. Always watching. Dad shifted. We were going to work something out. What kind of something? You sign off. Simple. Clean. That word again. Clean. Like erasing me was just a minor adjustment. I nodded slowly. And what do I get in return? A pause. Angela answered. You wouldn't have to worry about the property anymore. I almost smiled. That's not an answer. That's a benefit for you. Another pause. Longer this time. Dad leaned forward slightly. Marissa, this doesn't have to be complicated. It already is, because you made it that way. Angela set her fork down. You're being difficult. No, I'm being informed. That's different. That was the first moment Lila looked at me differently. Not like a sister. Like someone she didn't fully know. Good, because she didn't. Not anymore. I reached over and placed my hand on the folder. Still not opening it. Not yet. Let me ask you something. I looked directly at Dad. Do you know how much I've paid into this house? He didn't answer. Because he didn't know. Or worse, he knew and hoped I didn't. Angela tried to step in again. That's not relevant. It is. I opened the folder, slowly. Pulled out the first document. Placed it in the center of the table. A full payment history. Dates, amounts, every transfer. 46 months, $900 each. Total, $41,400. No one spoke, not immediately. Lila leaned forward slightly. Grandma Evelyn adjusted her glasses. Dad stared at the page. Angela didn't move. That's my contribution. I said it calmly. Not emotional, not loud. Just fact. Dad finally spoke. That was your choice. I looked at him. No, that was my responsibility. Because my name is on the loan. Because you asked me to sign. Angela's voice came in sharper now. No one forced you. I didn't say you did. I said you benefited. Silence. Thicker now. More real. I pulled out the second document, the deed. Placed it next to the first. 35% ownership. Clear. Stamped. Legal. I'm not a guest here. I said it quietly. I'm not optional. That was the first moment Dad didn't have a response ready. You could see it. The delay. the recalculation. So I gave him one more push. What's the current value of the house? He hesitated. Angela answered. Around 380. Not exact, not confident. I nodded. And my share? Silence. Say it. No one did, so I did. Around 130,000 in equity before loan balance, which means my portion after payoff is somewhere around, I paused just long enough, 50 to 60,000. Lila's head snapped toward Dad. Wait, what? And that was the moment everything shifted. Because this wasn't a family discussion anymore. This was math. Real numbers, real consequences. And for the first time, they realized I wasn't walking in blind. I leaned back slightly, hands calm, voice steady. You wanted me gone so you could sell clean. No resistance, no payout, no questions. Angela didn't speak. Dad didn't deny it. And silence like that, it tells you everything. I looked around the table, then back at them. You didn't miscalculate my feelings. You miscalculated my awareness. That's a different kind of mistake. No one moved. No one spoke. And I hadn't even shown them the last document yet, the one sitting at the bottom of the folder. The one that would change this from uncomfortable to irreversible. But I kept it there, for now, because some truths you don't reveal all at once. You let them sit in it first. And right then, they were just starting to understand how deep this actually went. At 11:38 that morning, the room went so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming from the kitchen. No one reached for their fork. No one looked at their plate. Every eye was either on the documents in the middle of the table or on me. That's the moment people start recalculating. Not emotionally, strategically. If you've ever watched someone realize they've underestimated you, you know the exact shift I'm talking about. Comment shift if you've seen it happen in real life. Dad leaned back slightly in his chair, not relaxed, regrouping. Angela was the first to move. Of course she was. She always moved first when control slipped. Marissa, her tone softened just enough to sound reasonable. This doesn't need to turn into something bigger than it is. I looked at her. It already is. You're making it that way. No, I'm making it visible. That landed harder than anything loud ever could. She held my gaze for a second longer than necessary. Then she changed tactics. Again. You've been away a long time. Distance changes perspective. That's true. I said it calmly. It just didn't change the facts. Dad stepped in. Let's not do this at the table. I tilted my head slightly. You brought it to the table. That stopped him. Clean, direct, no room to redirect. Grandma Evelyn shifted in her seat beside me. Not dramatically, just enough to signal she was still fully present. Watching. Always watching. And she hadn't said anything yet. That mattered. Because when she did, it would carry weight. Angela picked up her glass. Didn't drink, just held it. Wait, you've been paying almost half the mortgage this whole time? Her voice wasn't accusing, it was confused, looking for clarity. I nodded. Every month. She looked at Dad. You told me she wasn't involved. There it is, the first crack from inside the house. Dad didn't respond immediately. Angela did. We didn't think it was necessary to go into detail. Lila cut her off. That's not detail. That's everything. Angela's jaw tightened, just slightly, enough to notice. I leaned forward a little, still calm, still controlled. Let me make this easier. I reached into the folder again, not for the last document, not yet. For something smaller, a printed summary. 1 page, clean numbers, total contributions, ownership percentage, estimated equity range. I slid it toward the center. This is where we are. No one touched it at first. Then Lila pulled it closer, read it, twice. Her expression changed slowly. Not shock, realization. "David," she said quietly, "were you going to tell me any of this?" He didn't answer, because there was no version of the truth that worked in his favor anymore. Angela stepped in again. We were handling it internally. Lila looked up. "She lives here too." Angela's voice sharpened. "No, she doesn't." I didn't react, because that wasn't the point she thought it was. "You're right. I don't live here." I said it evenly. "But I pay here, and I own here. That's the part that matters." Silence, heavy again, the kind that presses on everyone at once. Dad leaned forward now, tone shifting, more direct. "If we agree to sell, you will," I corrected him. "Not if, when." He stopped, because he knew I was right. They didn't have another option. "Continue." "If we sell," he said, "you'll get your portion." I held his gaze. "Based on what number?" Angela answered quickly. "Market estimate." "No, independent appraisal." Her expression hardened. "That's not necessary." "It is, because I don't negotiate off assumptions. I negotiate off verified data." Another shift, another loss of control. "You're making this adversarial, Marissa." Angela again, always reframing. "No, I'm making it structured. That's different." Dad ran a hand over his face. "You've changed." I didn't flinch. "No, I stopped pretending." That was one of those lines you don't plan. It just comes out clean, and it stays. No one spoke after that. Not for a few seconds. Then, Grandma Evelyn moved. Slow, deliberate. She reached for the paper in front of Lila, pulled it closer, adjusted her glasses, read, carefully, fully. No one interrupted her, because no one in that room was stupid enough to. When she finished, she placed the paper back down. Not loudly, just final. Then she looked at Dad. Daniel, full name. That alone shifted the air. "You told me she stopped calling." Her voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. Dad looked at her, didn't answer. "You told me she moved on." Another pause. "You told me she wasn't part of this family anymore." Angela started to speak. "Evelyn," she didn't even look at her. "Daniel." That name again. "Answer me." The room held its breath, because this wasn't about the house anymore. This was about truth, and there's nowhere to hide from that when it's asked directly. Dad finally spoke. "We thought it was easier." "For who?" Her voice cut through clean. Not loud, but sharp, precise. Angela stepped in again. We were trying to avoid conflict. Grandma Evelyn turned her head slowly, and for the first time, she looked directly at Angela. Avoiding truth creates conflict, not the other way around. Angela didn't respond, because she couldn't, not without making it worse. Lila leaned back in her chair, processing everything. "You blocked her, didn't you?" She said it quietly. "Not to me, to them." Angela didn't answer. Dad didn't deny it. And silence like that, it confirms everything. Lila stood up, pushed her chair back slightly. Not dramatic, just enough to create distance. "That's not okay." No one argued with her, because there was no argument left. I sat there, still, watching it all unfold, because this wasn't something I needed to push. Truth does its own work once it's out. I reached for my water, took a slow sip, then set the glass down. And finally, I pulled out the last document. I didn't place it on the table immediately. I held it for a second, looked at both of them, because this was the point of no return. You tried to move without me. Now I'm going to show you exactly how far you got. I placed it down, between us, a printed email chain from the mortgage lender, and an attached notice. Official, time-stamped, clear. Co-borrower inquiry received. All parties notified. And below that, a request from the lender. for updated financial disclosures from the primary borrower. Triggered by my inquiry, meaning one thing: their situation was now under review. Not by me, by the bank. Angela leaned forward, read it, once, then again. Her face changed, not subtly, not controlled. For the first time, she looked unsettled. Dad picked it up next. His jaw tightened as he read. "What is this?" "Standard procedure," I said it calmly. "When a co-owner requests valuation, the lender reassesses exposure." A pause, which means I let it sit for a second, then finished. "They're looking at your numbers again." And just like that, the entire balance of power in that room shifted. Because this was no longer just about me getting paid. This was about whether they could even move forward at all. And they hadn't prepared for that, not even close. Dad looked up at me. Angela didn't. She was still staring at the paper. And in that moment, I knew something they didn't realize yet. There was more going on financially than they had been honest about. And whatever it was, the bank was about to see it too. But I didn't say that out loud. Not yet. Because some collapses, you don't rush. You let them happen on their own. At 11:52 that morning, Angela stopped pretending. Not gradually, not subtly, completely. She set the paper down, folded her hands on the table, and for the first time since I walked in, the version of her that managed everything slipped. "This is unnecessary," she said. Her voice wasn't soft anymore. It wasn't controlled. It was tight. And underneath that, there was something else. Pressure. If you've ever seen someone realize the situation is no longer contained, you know that exact moment. Comment pressure if you've seen it break through before. I didn't respond right away. Because she wasn't talking to me. Not really. She was trying to reframe the room, trying to regain control of the narrative. Dad looked at me. "What exactly did you trigger?" I leaned back slightly. "Nothing unusual." That wasn't an answer. It was. He stared at me, waiting. So I gave him just enough. When a co-borrower requests an equity position, the lender reviews the loan. A pause. And all parties attached to it. Angela's fingers tightened against each other. Slight, but visible. "We've never missed a payment," she said. I nodded. "That's not the only metric they look at." Silence. That landed. Because now, we weren't talking about what had already happened. We were talking about what might be exposed. Lila looked between us again. "What does that mean?" No one answered her, so I did. "It means the bank is verifying that everything tied to this loan still meets their requirements." Her brow furrowed. "Like what?" I held Angela's gaze for a second, then shifted back to Lila. "Income, debt, financial disclosures?" The word disclosures hung in the air. Heavy. Angela picked up her glass again. This time she drank. Slow. Deliberate. Buying time. Dad exhaled. "This is ridiculous." "Is it?" I asked quietly. Another silence. Because now he wasn't sure. And that uncertainty? That's where leverage lives. "Let me ask you something," I said. I looked directly at Angela. "When was the last time you updated your financials with the lender?" She didn't answer. "Not immediately." Then. "That's not your concern." "It is. Because if something has changed, it affects the loan, which affects me, which makes it my concern. Clean, logical, unavoidable." Dad shifted in his chair. "Angela," she cut him off with a look. Sharp, controlled, but too late. The room had already felt it, the misalignment. Lila noticed too. Her eyes moved between them. "Wait, has something changed?" No one answered. Again. In silence like that, it builds its own answer. Grandma Evelyn spoke, soft but clear. "Angela." That was all she said, just her name. And somehow, that carried more weight than anything else. Angela finally looked at her. "We've had some business fluctuations." Careful wording, minimized, controlled, but not denial. Lila leaned forward. What does that mean? Angela hesitated. For the first time since I'd known her, the boutique has had a slower year. That wasn't the full truth. I could see it in the way she avoided specifics. Dad added quickly, "It's temporary." I didn't speak, because this part, they needed to say themselves. And when people try to soften reality, they usually reveal more than they intend. How much? Lila asked. Direct, no cushioning. Angela didn't answer. Dad looked at her, then back at Lila. We're managing it. That's not a number. No, it's not. Silence again, but different now. Less controlled, more exposed. I tapped the document lightly with my finger. The lender is going to ask for real numbers. Angela's eyes flicked to me, sharp, defensive. We'll handle it. You'll have to, because now they're looking. That was the shift, from family conversation to external accountability. And that's where things start to fall apart. Because you can argue with family, you can manipulate perception, you can rewrite stories, but you can't do that with a lender, not when everything is documented. Dad leaned forward again, lower voice now, more serious. What are you trying to do here, Marissa? I met his gaze. Protect my position, that's it. Angela let out a short breath. You're putting the entire sale at risk. No, I corrected her. Your decisions already did that. I just made it visible. That line landed hard, because it was true, and truth doesn't need volume. Lila stood up again, this time fully, chair pushed back. So, let me get this straight. She looked at both of them. You were going to sell the house without telling me, without telling her. And now the bank is reviewing everything because you didn't include her. Angela opened her mouth, closed it. Dad didn't answer, which was answer enough. Lila shook her head slightly. That's not okay. Grandma Evelyn nodded once, subtle but decisive. No one challenged it, because at this point, there was nothing left to challenge. Only consequences. I reached for the folder, closed it. Calm, controlled. I'm not here to stop you from selling. I said it evenly. I'm here to make sure it's done correctly. Dad looked at me, and for the first time, there was no pushback, just calculation. Angela wasn't looking at me anymore. She was staring at the document, reading it again, like maybe the wording would change. It wouldn't. And then, she asked the question, the real one. How long do we have? There it is. Not denial, not deflection. Reality. I answered simply, that depends on what they find. Silence, heavier than before. Because now, we were in unknown territory, and they knew it. I stood up slowly, not abruptly, just enough to signal a shift. I'm going to stay in town for a few days. Dad looked up. Why? Because whatever happens next, I want to be here for it. Angela finally looked at me again, and this time, there was no control left in her expression, just tension, and something else. Fear. Not of me, of what might be uncovered. And that's when I knew for sure. There was more to this, more than unpaid bills, more than a struggling business. Something they hadn't said, something they thought they could manage quietly. But now, the bank was looking, and once that happens, you don't get to control the outcome anymore. You just get to react to it. I picked up my keys, walked toward the door, then paused, turned back slightly. One more thing. They both looked at me. This isn't personal. A small beat. It's contractual. That line stayed in the room after I left. And as I stepped outside into the heat of a North Carolina afternoon, I realized something. This wasn't going to end at a sale. Not clean, not simple. Because whatever they had been hiding was already starting to surface. And the next call they got wasn't going to be from me. At 2:18 that afternoon, my phone rang while I was sitting in the parking lot of a quiet coffee shop 3 miles from the house, watching condensation slide down a plastic cup I hadn't touched. Unknown number. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. Is this Staff Sergeant Marissa Cole? Male voice, measured, professional. Yes? This is Daniel Hart with Southeastern Lending. I'm calling regarding the equity inquiry you submitted this morning. There it is, the next move, already in motion. If you've ever watched something you set in motion start moving on its own, you know that feeling. Not panic, not excitement, just confirmation. Yes, I said, I'm available. Good, I just need to verify a few things with you. He went through identity first. Name, last 4 of my SSN, loan reference. Clean, routine. Then his tone shifted slightly, more formal. Your inquiry has triggered a standard review of the loan file. I want to make sure you understand what that entails. I do. A pause. He continued anyway. We'll be requesting updated financial disclosures from all borrowers, as well as verifying current occupancy status and income alignment. There it is again. Income, occupancy, alignment. 3 words that don't sound dangerous, until they are. Understood, I said. Have you had any recent communication with the primary borrower regarding changes in financial condition? Careful question. I answered carefully. No direct disclosures. Another pause. Then, all right, we'll proceed with standard protocol. You'll receive formal documentation within 24 to 48 hours. Thank you, Ms. Cole. Yeah? His tone dropped just slightly, neutral but intentional. If there are discrepancies, this process can impact the loan's standing. I didn't react. I already knew that. Understood. We ended the call. I set the phone down slowly. Still didn't touch the coffee. Because now it was confirmed. This wasn't contained anymore. This wasn't just a family issue. This was institutional. And institutions don't care about feelings. They care about numbers, compliance, risk. I leaned back in my seat, closed my eyes for a second. Not overwhelmed, focused. Because now the timeline had changed. Whatever Angela and Dad had been managing quietly was about to be put under a microscope. And if there was something off, it wouldn't stay hidden. My phone buzzed again. This time, Dad. I let it ring. Then it stopped. Then again. Then a text. Call me. Now. I looked at it for a second, then locked the screen. He could wait. Because whatever urgency he was feeling wasn't about me. It was about what was coming. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. Same number, I answered this time. What? No greeting, no build-up, just pressure. I spoke evenly. I'm on the phone, Dad. What did you do? Same question, different tone, sharper, less controlled. I requested information. Stop saying it like that. That is what I did. You triggered a full review. Yes. Do you have any idea what that means? I let a small pause sit, then answered. It means they're verifying the loan. His breath came through the phone, heavier now. There's no reason for that. There is now. Silence. Then, you need to call them back. Tell them it was a mistake. No. Flat. Immediate. Marissa. No. You don't get to involve me in a legal agreement and then remove me when it's inconvenient. His voice rose slightly. This could affect everything. I didn't raise mine. Then you should have thought about that before trying to cut me out. Silence again. But this one was different, because now he didn't have control. He didn't even have direction, just reaction. Angela's voice came faintly in the background. What did she say? He didn't answer her. He stayed on me. We were going to handle this. You keep saying that, I said calmly, but you weren't. Another pause. Long. Heavy. Then his tone shifted again. Lower. Almost careful. What do you want? There it is. The real question. Finally. I looked out through the windshield. People moving in and out of the coffee shop. Normal life. Unaware. I want transparency, I said it simply. And I want the process handled correctly. That's it? Yes. He didn't believe that. I could hear it. Because people like him expect a fight, not structure, not clarity. Angela's voice again, louder now. Put me on! He hesitated. Then, Angela wants to talk to you. No. Immediate. Why not? Because this isn't a group discussion, this is a legal matter. You can communicate through proper channels. That line landed. Hard. Cold. Final. You're shutting us out. No, I'm setting boundaries. That's different. Another silence. Then, you've changed. Again. Same line, same attempt. I didn't take it. No, I stopped accepting less than I agreed to. That one hit, because it wasn't about emotion. It was about agreement, contract, terms, things that don't bend. He exhaled slowly. We'll deal with this. Yes, you will. And I ended the call. This time, I put the phone face down, and I finally picked up the coffee. Took a sip. It was already lukewarm. Didn't matter, because now, everything was moving. Not because I pushed harder, because I stopped stepping back. If you take nothing else from this, remember this line. Silence protects them. Action protects you. I sat there for another 20 minutes, not doing anything, just thinking, mapping, because I knew something now. For the lender to move this fast, there had to be a reason. Something in the file, something that didn't line up. They don't escalate for nothing. Which meant one thing. There was a layer here I hadn't seen yet. And whatever it wasn't small. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Lila. Mom is freaking out. I stared at the message, then replied. About what? 3 dots, then. She's on the phone with someone. I heard the word audit. I leaned back slowly. There it is. Audit. Not full yet, but close enough. Which meant the situation had already moved beyond internal review. I typed back. Stay out of it. A pause. Then she replied. Are we in trouble? I didn't answer immediately, because that question depends on who you are in the situation. Finally, I typed. I'm not. Sent. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then nothing. I set the phone down again, looked out at the street. Cars passing, people walking. Everything normal. Except it wasn't. Not anymore. Because inside that house, pressure was building. Fast. And pressure does one of 2 things. It reveals truth, or it breaks something open. And the way Angela's voice sounded in the background, the way Dad stopped arguing and started asking, the way the lender moved within hours, this wasn't going to stay contained. Not for long. I finished the coffee, started the car, and as I pulled out of the parking lot, one thought stayed clear. Whatever they've been hiding is about to come out. And when it does, it won't be me exposing it. It'll be the system they thought they could outmaneuver. And that is a much harder thing to control. At 6:43 that evening, I was sitting on the edge of a motel bed with the lights off, phone in my hand, and the entire situation finally quiet. No calls, no messages, no pressure. Just silence. And if you've ever been in the middle of something intense and it suddenly goes quiet, you know that feeling isn't relief. It's anticipation. Comment quiet if you know exactly what I mean. Because silence like that doesn't mean it's over. It means something is building. I hadn't gone back to the house. I didn't need to. Everything that needed to be said had already been said. Now it was about what they would do next, and more importantly, what I would. I placed the folder on the small table by the window, opened it again, looked at the documents. Not to review them, to anchor myself. Because this wasn't emotional anymore. It was structured, controlled, deliberate, and that's how it needed to stay. I reached for my phone and scrolled to one contact, Rebecca Dawson. I called. She picked up on the second ring. Tell me everything. No greeting, no small talk, just alignment. I gave her the full update. The dinner, the confrontation, the lender call, the word audit. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a short pause. Then, good. Same word as before, same tone. You're still ahead. Ahead of what? Them. She said it simply. They're reacting, you're planning. That's the difference. I leaned back slightly. They're hiding something. Yes. No hesitation, not a question, a fact. What kind of something? She exhaled softly. We don't guess, we confirm. That's how you stay in control. I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. What's next? Two things. Her voice shifted slightly, more precise. First, we wait for the lender's formal request. They'll ask for updated financials. If there's inconsistency, it surfaces there. And second, I asked, you prepare for the sale anyway. Even if they're in trouble? Especially if they are, she paused. Because if the property becomes their only way out, they will push harder. And when people push harder, they make mistakes. That line stayed with me. People make mistakes under pressure, and right now, they were under a lot of it. What about communication? I asked. Minimal, through me if needed. Do not engage emotionally. Do not respond to pressure. Let them come to you with structure, not demands. Understood. Another pause. Then her tone softened, just slightly. You handled today well. I didn't respond to that. Not because it didn't matter, because I didn't need validation. I needed results. We ended the call. I set the phone down, looked at the ceiling, and for the first time since that morning, I allowed myself to feel something. Not anger, not hurt. Distance. Clean. Clear. Like stepping back from something that used to define you and realizing it doesn't anymore. That's a dangerous kind of calm, because once you reach it, you don't go back. My phone buzzed again. Lila. You still in town? I typed back. Yes. A few seconds. Then, can I see you? I stared at the message for a moment, then replied, tomorrow. She sent back a location, a small diner near downtown, 10 a.m. I confirmed, then put the phone down, because that conversation would matter. Not for strategy, for clarity. She was part of this, even if she didn't know how deep it went. And something about the way she looked at the table earlier told me she wanted the truth, not the version she'd been given. I turned off the lamp. The room went dark. And in that quiet, my mind went back to one detail. The word audit. Not review, not check. Audit. That's not casual. That's not routine. That means something flagged, something real. And if that's the case, then this wasn't just about a struggling boutique. It was about something deeper, something documented, something that didn't align. I sat up again, reached for my phone, opened my notes, started writing. Not feelings, facts, timeline. Loan opened, payments made, inquiry sent, lender response, behavior shift. Because when things escalate, memory isn't enough. You need structure. You need sequence. You need clarity. That's how you stay ahead. I stopped writing after about 10 minutes, read through it once, clean, accurate, grounded. Then I added one more line. They moved without me. Now they move because of me. I stared at that sentence for a second, then locked the phone. Because that was the truth. Not emotional, not dramatic, just real. Outside, a car passed, headlights cutting briefly across the ceiling, then gone. Quiet again. And in that quiet, I realized something. This wasn't about winning. It wasn't about revenge. It was about correction. Resetting something that had been off for years, and doing it in a way that couldn't be ignored. Because ignoring it is how it got this far in the first place. I lay back down, closed my eyes, but sleep didn't come right away. Because my mind kept circling one thing. if the lender finds something, what exactly are they going to find? That question stayed with me, unanswered, heavy, important. And somewhere across town, in that house, I knew they weren't sleeping either. Not with the phone calls, not with the pressure, not with whatever they were trying to manage behind closed doors. Because silence works both ways. It gives you space to think, but it also gives you space to realize what's coming next. And the next day was going to bring answers. Not all of them, but enough to change everything again. At 9:58 the next morning, I was already sitting in a booth at a diner that smelled like burnt coffee and syrup, watching the door like I was waiting for a briefing to start. 2 minutes early. Always. The place was half full. Construction guys at the counter. A couple arguing quietly near the window. Normal. Unremarkable. That's why I chose it. No one pays attention in places like this. If you've ever had a conversation where you knew the truth was finally going to come out, you know why setting matters. Comment ready if you've ever walked into one of those moments. At exactly 10:01, the door opened. Lila stepped in. She looked different. Not physically. Something else. More aware. Less certain. She spotted me, hesitated for half a second, then walked over. Hey. Hey. She slid into the seat across from me. No hug, no small talk. Just presence. That told me everything. A waitress came by. We ordered without really thinking. Coffee for me, orange juice for her. Then silence. Not awkward, just waiting. She broke it first. What's really going on? Direct. Good. I didn't answer immediately, because this wasn't about dumping information. It was about giving her the right pieces at the right time. What do you think is going on? She frowned slightly. I think... She paused, like she was choosing whether to say it out loud.
I think they were hiding something.
I nodded once. That's a good start. Her eyes narrowed just a little. Don't do that. Do what? Talk like I'm not part of it. Fair. I leaned forward slightly. You are part of it. You just weren't informed. She sat back, exhaled. Okay. Then inform me. There it is. Permission. I reached into my bag, pulled out the folder, placed it between us. You've seen some of this. She nodded. At the house. Not all of it. I opened it, turned it toward her. This is the full payment history. She scanned it. Her expression shifted again, slower this time, deeper. You really paid all this? Yes. Why didn't you say anything? I held her gaze. Because I thought it was understood. A small pause. It wasn't. No, it wasn't. She kept reading, then looked up. Why didn't they tell me? I didn't answer that, because she already knew. You don't hide something like this by accident. You hide it on purpose. Her jaw tightened slightly. That landed. I pulled out the second document, the deed, placed it next to the first. This is why it matters. She read it more carefully, slower, then looked up again. So they can't sell without you? No. And they tried anyway. A beat. Yeah. Her voice dropped. They did. We sat there for a second, letting that settle. Because that realization, it changes how you see everything. Then she asked the question I was waiting for. What happens now? I took a sip of coffee. Finally. Cold. Didn't matter. Now we wait. For what? For the lender. She frowned. Why? I reached into the folder again. This time, I pulled out a printed email. Not the one from yesterday. A new one. Received at 7:12 that morning. I slid it across to her. She read it. Slowly. Then again. Her eyes widened just slightly. They're requesting full financial disclosure? Yes. From both of them? Yes. She looked up at me. Why? I held her gaze. Because something didn't match. Silence. Longer this time. Heavier. What kind of something? I shook my head slightly. We don't assume, we wait. She leaned back, processing. But you think it's bad? I didn't answer. That was answer enough. She stared at the paper again, then said quietly, Mom's been stressed for months. There it is, a piece. Small, but important. About what? The store, sales dropping, she hesitated. And money stuff. Define money stuff. She shook her head. I don't know everything, but I heard arguments, late at night, about debt, about payments, about keeping things afloat. That lined up, too cleanly. How much do you think they owe? She looked at me, then away. I don't know, but it didn't sound small. I nodded once. That confirmed the direction. Not the full picture, but enough. If the lender sees that, she didn't finish the sentence. They will. I said it calmly. And when they do, another pause. Then I finished. It changes their ability to sell, or refinance, or even keep the loan as is. Her eyes snapped back to mine. Wait, what? If their financials don't meet the original terms anymore, the lender can reassess risk, which means everything is on the table. She stared at me, like the ground just shifted under her. This isn't just about the house, is it? No, it's not. That was tier 2. Not just betrayal, evidence. Documentation. Now we were moving into consequences. She looked down at the table, hands flat, still. I didn't know. I know. A small beat. That's the problem. Silence. Then she asked something softer, more personal. Why didn't you come back sooner? I looked at her. Because I thought I still had a place here. A pause. And I didn't want to find out I didn't. She swallowed slightly. You do. I didn't respond to that, not because I didn't hear it, because it wasn't something she could decide. Not alone. Instead, I shifted the conversation. You need to stay out of whatever happens next. Her head snapped up. What? You heard me. Why? Because this is about legal and financial exposure now, not family discussion. She frowned. I am family. Yes, and that's exactly why you don't get pulled into it. She didn't like that. I could see it. But she didn't argue. Because part of her understood. What are you going to do? I closed the folder. Nothing. That answer surprised her. Nothing? Correct. I'm going to let the process run. And when it does, they'll have to respond. And how they respond will tell me everything I need to know. She sat back slowly. That's it? That's it. A pause. Then I added, people reveal themselves under pressure. We're there now. She nodded slowly, like it was clicking into place. Then she said something I didn't expect. I think they're scared. I looked at her. Good. Simple. Cold. True. Because fear is where mistakes happen, and mistakes create openings. We sat there for a while after that, not talking much, just letting everything settle. When the check came, I paid without thinking. She didn't argue. We walked out together, stopped near the door. What happens if this gets worse? She asked it quietly. Honest. I looked at her, then answered just as quietly. Then it gets real. She nodded, didn't ask more, because she understood enough. We went separate ways, she toward her car, me toward mine. And as I got in, my phone buzzed. New email from the lender. Subject line, immediate documentation required. I stared at it for a second, then opened it. And as I read the first paragraph, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a review anymore. This was escalation. And whatever they found was already serious enough to move faster than expected. At 11:36 that morning, I was back in my motel room with the curtains half drawn, reading the lender's email for the third time, making sure I didn't miss a single word. Subject line, immediate documentation required. That's not routine language. That's escalation. And escalation means one thing: something already triggered. If you've ever seen a situation go from controlled to urgent overnight, you know that shift. Comment escalation if you've lived it. I sat at the small desk by the window, laptop open, phone beside me, and read the email again, carefully, line by line. Due to discrepancies identified during preliminary review, all borrowers are required to submit updated financial documentation within 72 hours. Discrepancies. Not review. Not verification. Discrepancies. That word doesn't appear unless something doesn't line up. I leaned back slowly. There it is. Not confirmed yet, but close. Very close. The rest of the email listed required documents: income statements, business revenue reports, debt disclosures, bank statements, full picture, no room to hide. And the timeline? 72 hours. That's pressure, deliberate pressure, because whatever they saw, they didn't want it lingering. My phone buzzed, right on cue. Dad. I let it ring, then stop, then ring again. I picked up on the third call. This is out of control. No greeting, no build, just panic trying to sound like authority. I kept my tone flat. No, it's under review. You don't understand what you've done. I didn't respond immediately, because I wanted him to hear himself. Then I said quietly, I understand exactly what I've done. Silence. Then, they're asking for everything. Yes. Do you know how invasive that is? Yes. Another pause. Longer this time, because now he knew I wasn't backing off. Angela's voice came in sharp behind him. Put it on speaker. He didn't ask this time. He just did it. Marissa. Angela. Her voice was tight, controlled, but barely. You need to fix this. No. Immediate. Cold. You initiated a process that is now affecting our financial standing. I corrected her. You created a situation that triggered it. Don't twist this. I'm not twisting anything. I'm stating sequence. That landed, because sequence doesn't lie. You contacted the lender, because you tried to remove me from the transaction. We were going to handle it. You keep saying that, but you didn't. Another silence. But this one was different. It wasn't just pressure. It was exposure. Angela lowered her voice slightly, more controlled, more calculated. If this goes further, it could impact the loan. I nodded slightly, even though she couldn't see it. Yes, and? A beat. You're willing to risk that? I didn't hesitate. I'm not the one who created the risk. That was the line. The one that shifted everything fully out of emotion and into accountability. Dad spoke again. Lower now. Less aggressive. More real. What do they want? Finally, the right question. Full financial disclosure. Angela exhaled sharply. You told them something. No, I gave them nothing beyond my legal request. Then how did they? Because something didn't match, I said it calmly. And now they're verifying. Silence. Long. Heavy. Because now, they were both thinking the same thing. What did the bank see? And more importantly, what would they find next? Angela spoke again, but this time, there was something new in her voice. Not control, not anger, concern. We can provide documentation. Good, I said it simply. Then do it. It's not that simple. There it is, the crack, finally visible. Why not? No answer, just breathing. Then, some of the numbers need to be organized. I almost smiled. Organized. That's the word people use when things don't align cleanly. How far off are they? I asked it directly. Angela didn't answer. Dad didn't answer. Silence again. And this time, it was loud. louder than anything they could have said. I leaned back slightly, then said the one thing that needed to be said. If the numbers don't match the original loan profile, they're going to flag it, Angela snapped. We know how this works. Do you? Because if you did, you wouldn't be here. That one hit. Hard, clean, final. Dad spoke again, quiet. What happens if they flag it? There it is, the real fear, not the process, the outcome. I answered without hesitation. They reassess the loan, which means everything changes. Rate, terms, approval status, potential enforcement. Silence, complete. Because now, we were in Tier 3. Not just betrayal, not just evidence, consequences, real ones. Angela's voice dropped, barely above a whisper. They wouldn't. They will. I said it evenly. If the discrepancy is material, and based on their response time, it probably is. No one spoke after that, not for several seconds. Then, Dad said something I didn't expect. What do you want us to do? Not defensive, not controlling, just asking. I kept it simple. Tell the truth. Angela inhaled sharply. It's not that simple. It is. You just don't like the outcome. Silence. Then I added one more thing. And you should probably stop trying to manage this internally. Because at this point, you're not managing anything. You're responding. And you're behind. That was it. That was the shift. From control to reaction. Angela didn't argue. Dad didn't push back. Because they both knew. It was true. I ended the call. No goodbye, no follow-up. Just done. I set the phone down slowly, looked at the email again, then opened my laptop, started a new document. Not emotional, not reactive, structured. Notes, timeline, potential outcomes. Because now, this wasn't about what they did. It was about what happens next, and I needed to be ready for all of it. I wrote one line at the top. If the loan fails, the sale becomes mandatory. I stared at that sentence for a second, then added another. If the sale becomes mandatory, leverage shifts completely. That was the reality. Simple, unavoidable. And for the first time since this started, I realized something. This might not end with them selling the house by choice. It might end with them having no choice at all. My phone buzzed again. Lila, what's happening? I stared at the message, then typed back. It's moving faster now. A pause. Then she replied, Mom's crying. I didn't respond immediately, because that detail, it matters. But it doesn't change the outcome. Finally, I typed, tell her to get the documents ready. 3 dots, then gone, then nothing. I closed my laptop, stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the parking lot. Still, quiet, normal. And inside that quiet, everything was shifting. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. Because once the system starts moving, you don't stop it. You don't redirect it. You deal with it. And the next 72 hours, we're going to decide everything. But there was one thing I still didn't know. What exactly were they hiding in those numbers? And how bad was it going to be when it came out? At 9:12 on Thursday morning, I was standing outside a glass conference room in a mid-rise office building in downtown Fayetteville, holding a paper cup of coffee I hadn't touched, waiting for a meeting my father never planned for me to attend. But I was there anyway, because this time, nothing was happening without me in the room. Inside, I could see them through the glass. Dad, Angela, and a man in a gray suit I recognized from email signatures. Mark Ellison, Senior Loan Officer, Southeastern Lending. They were already seated, already tense, already behind. If you've ever walked into a room where people realize too late they can't control the outcome anymore, you know that energy. Comment, too late, if you've felt it before. I checked my phone. 9:13, right on time. Rebecca stood beside me, calm, composed, folder in hand. She didn't look at me when she spoke. Ready? Yes. She nodded once, then opened the door. The conversation inside stopped immediately. Every head turned. Dad froze. Angela went completely still. Mark Ellison looked between us. Neutral, professional. You're not supposed to be here. Dad's voice. Low, controlled. But it didn't land, because this wasn't his room anymore. Rebecca spoke before I could. Marissa Cole is a co-borrower on this loan. Her presence is not optional. Clean, legal, unarguable. Mark nodded once. That's correct. Please, have a seat. Just like that, the dynamic shifted. I walked in, sat down across from them, placed my folder on the table. Didn't open it. Didn't need to. Because today wasn't about what I brought. It was about what they couldn't hide anymore. Mark adjusted a stack of papers in front of him. Let's proceed. His tone was steady, measured. We've completed a preliminary review of the financial disclosures submitted. He paused.
Look directly at Dad.
There are discrepancies. There it is, out loud, official. Angela shifted slightly. Mark continued. Specifically regarding reported business income and outstanding liabilities. Angela spoke quickly. We explained that. You provided documentation, he cut in, calm but firm. And the documentation does not align with the original financial profile submitted at the time of loan approval. Silence. Heavy. Real. Dad leaned forward.
What does that mean exactly?
Mark didn't rush the answer. It means the current financial condition materially differs from what was represented. There it is, materially. That word changes everything. Angela's voice came in sharper now. The business had a downturn. That happens. Yes, Mark nodded. It does. But undisclosed liabilities of this magnitude require reassessment. I didn't move, didn't speak, because this part wasn't mine to push. It was already unfolding. Because Sap sat beside me, still, watching. Dad asked the next question. How much are we talking about? Mark looked down at the file, then back up. Approximately $87,000 in undeclared business debt. The room went completely still. Lila wasn't there, but if she had been, that would have been the moment everything clicked for her. Angela didn't speak. Dad didn't react immediately. Because that number doesn't leave room for interpretation. That's not fluctuation, that's exposure. Mark continued. Additionally, there are inconsistencies in income reporting over the past 12 months. Angela found her voice again. We were reinvesting. That may be the case, Mark said calmly. But from a lending perspective, the risk profile has changed. There it is. Risk. That's what this is about now. Not family, not intention. Risk. Dad leaned back slowly. What happens now? Mark folded his hands, measured, clear. There are 3 possible outcomes.
He held up one finger.
1. Loan restructuring. If you can demonstrate sufficient recovery and stability. A second finger. 2. Forced sale of the property to satisfy the loan under revised conditions. Angela inhaled sharply. And the third? Mark looked at both of them. 3. Loan default proceedings if compliance requirements are not met. Silence. Absolute. Because now, everything was on the table, and none of it was good. I spoke for the first time. Calm. Even.
If the property is sold, my equity is paid out at closing.
Mark nodded. Correct, based on verified market value and ownership percentage. Angela turned to me. Sharp. You're really doing this? I met her gaze. No emotion. This is already happening. I'm just participating. That line landed exactly where it needed to, because it was true. This wasn't something I created. It was something I refused to ignore. Dad looked between us, then back at Mark. How fast does this move? Mark didn't hesitate. Given the current status, 30 to 45 days. That's not time. That's pressure. Angela shook her head slightly. This is insane. No, I said quietly. This is structured. She looked at me, and for the first time, there was no strategy left in her expression, just reality. You could have handled this differently. I didn't respond immediately. Then I said the one thing that had been true from the start. So could you. Silence.
Mark gathered the papers. We'll be issuing formal notice by end of day. Please be prepared to comply with documentation requests immediately.
He stood. Meeting over. Just like that. No resolution. Just direction. And that direction was not in their favor. We stood. Rebecca closed her folder. Dad didn't look at me. Angela did, but not the same way as before. No control. No calculation. Just something quieter. Heavier. We walked out of the room, into the hallway.
Fluorescent lights. Neutral space.
But everything had changed. Dad finally spoke, low, almost to himself. 87,000. Angela didn't respond, because there was nothing to say. Rebecca turned to me. We'll move forward with appraisal immediately. I nodded, yes, because now, this wasn't theoretical. This was execution. Step by step, document by document, outcome by outcome. As we walked toward the elevator, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, not relief. Closure. The kind that comes when something hidden is finally seen. Not by you, by everyone. And once that happens, there's no going back. But there was still one thing left, one step, one moment, where everything would become public. Not just in the conference room, not just in documents, out loud, in front of everyone who had been told a different story. And that moment was coming sooner than they were ready for.
At 6:27 on Saturday evening, I was standing at the entrance of the Fayetteville Community Center with a printed appraisal report in my hand and a room full of people inside who had spent the last 4 years believing a version of me that never existed. Labor Day fundraiser, Angela's idea. Annual. Local vendors, family friends, extended relatives. The kind of event where reputation matters, where stories circulate, where perception becomes truth. And tonight, that truth was about to change. If you've ever had a moment where everything hidden finally comes out in front of everyone, you know exactly how this feels. Comment exposed if you've lived through it. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was warm, busy, laughter, music, tables lined with food. Normal. Carefully normal. Angela stood near the center, talking to a group of women from her boutique circle. Dad was near the back, speaking with a couple of neighbors.
Lila spotted me first. Of course she did. Her eyes widened slightly. Then she nodded. Not surprised. Not anymore. Good. Because I didn't come here to surprise anyone. I came here to finish it. I walked in calmly. No rush, no hesitation. And just like that, people started noticing. You can feel it when attention shifts. Conversations slow, eyes turn, names get whispered. Marissa? I heard it from somewhere behind me. Then again, I kept walking, straight toward the center. Angela saw me when I was about 10 feet away, and for a split second, her face went completely still. Then she smiled, that same practiced smile, controlled, polished. Marissa, you made it. Like this was expected, like nothing had happened. I nodded once. Angela. Dad stepped in beside her, more guarded, more aware. What are you doing here? His voice was low, but it carried. I met his eyes. Attending. A beat.
Then I added, like everyone else.
That line landed, because it stripped away the idea that I was the outsider, which I wasn't. Not legally. Not anymore. Angela gestured toward the room. We're in the middle of something. I looked around. Yes, I can see that. A pause. Then I stepped slightly forward. Good. Because this involves everyone. That shifted the air. Immediately. People nearby stopped pretending not to listen. Dad's voice tightened. Not here. No, I said calmly. Here is exactly where it needs to happen. Angela's smile faded, just slightly. Marissa? I raised a hand, not aggressive, just enough to stop her. We're not doing this quietly anymore. That was the line, the one that moved everything from private to public. Silence spread outward, like a ripple. Lila stepped closer, not speaking, just present, witnessing. I placed the appraisal report on the nearest table, flat, visible, clear. Let's talk about the house. No one moved, no one interrupted, because now, everyone understood. This wasn't a conversation, it was a reveal. Dad spoke first, trying to regain control. This isn't the time or place. It is, because for 4 years, you told everyone I wasn't involved, that I didn't contribute, that I walked away. I let that sit. Then I continued. That wasn't true. Murmurs. Quiet, but spreading. Angela stepped in. This is inappropriate. No, I said evenly. What's inappropriate is rewriting someone's role in a legal agreement to suit your narrative. That line hit. Because now, this wasn't just personal. It was factual. I opened the report, turned it toward the group closest to us. Current appraised value, $402,000. People leaned in, reading, processing. My ownership, 35%. Clear, documented, verified. Then I said it. My equity position is just over $60,000. The room went quiet, completely. Because numbers make things real. Angela's voice came in sharp. This is a private matter. Not when it involves misrepresentation, I replied. And not when you've already made it public, by telling people a different story. That was the shift, from defense to exposure. Dad tried again, lower, more controlled. You're making a scene. I looked at him. No, I'm correcting one. That line stayed. People don't forget lines like that. Angela stepped closer now. Her voice dropped. You're hurting this family. I held her gaze. You already did that. I'm just not covering it anymore. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Then I added the part they didn't want said out loud. The lender has flagged the loan. There it is, the final layer. Public. Unfiltered. Gasps, whispers, confusion. What does that mean? Someone asked from behind. I didn't look. I answered. It means the financial disclosures didn't match. Angela froze. Dad didn't move. Because now, there was nowhere left to go. I continued. There is over $80,000 in undisclosed business debt tied to this property. The room shifted, physically. People stepping back, recalculating. Because this wasn't just family drama anymore. This was financial risk. Real. Documented. Immediate. Angela shook her head, trying, still trying. That's being handled. I nodded. Yes, by the lender, not by you. That was the collapse. Right there. Not loud, not explosive, just final. Because once something is out like that, you don't take it back. Dad looked at me, and for the first time, he didn't argue, didn't deflect, didn't redirect. He just said it. We made mistakes. Quiet, almost lost in the room, but it landed. Because it was the first real thing he'd said. Angela didn't speak, because she couldn't, not without making it worse. Lila stood beside me now, not touching, just aligned. That mattered more than anything else. I looked around the room, at people who had heard one version for years, and were now hearing another. Then I said the last thing I needed to say. The house will be sold. The proceeds will be handled legally, and my portion will be paid in full. No emotion, no anger, just fact.
because that's all this ever needed to be. A man near the back spoke quietly. So she owns part of it? Yes, I answered without hesitation. Always did. That was it. That was the moment. The narrative broke. Not because I forced it, because I replaced it with truth. Angela stepped back, physically, like she needed distance. Dad stayed where he was, still, processing. Lila exhaled slowly, and the room started moving again. Conversations restarting, but different now. Quieter, more aware. Because once something like that is said, it doesn't disappear. It stays. I picked up the report, closed it, then looked at them one last time. This isn't revenge. A small pause. It's correction. That was the final line, clean, complete. I turned, walked toward the door. No one stopped me. No one tried, because there was nothing left to stop. Outside, the air felt cooler, quieter, real. And as the door closed behind me, I knew one thing for certain. It was done. But not finished. Because there was still one step left, one final outcome. Not loud, not public, just quiet. The kind that comes after everything settles. And that's where the real ending begins. On a Thursday morning, exactly 19 days after that fundraiser, I was sitting at a small desk in my barracks room at Fort Bragg, watching a wire transfer confirmation load on my screen. $61,280.43. Cleared. Available. Final. I didn't react right away. Didn't smile. Didn't move. I just looked at the number. Because this wasn't about the money. Not really. If you've ever had something owed to you finally returned after years of being overlooked, you know the feeling. It's not excitement. It's quiet. Comment closure if you felt that before. I leaned back in my chair slowly, exhaled once, and closed the laptop. That was it. No more calls, no more documents, no more negotiations. The house on Winding Creek had sold, not by choice, by necessity. The lender pushed, the timeline tightened, and in the end, they didn't have another option. The final appraisal came in at $398,000. After loan payoff, fees, and adjustments, my share landed just over $61,000. Clean, documented, transferred, exactly how it should have been from the beginning. I picked up my phone. No missed calls. No messages from Dad. None from Angela. That part didn't surprise me. Some people don't reach out after things end. They just disappear into the version of events they can live with. And I let them, because I wasn't waiting anymore. That was the difference. 2 weeks after the sale, Lila drove out to see me. No announcement, just a text. I'm here. I met her outside near the parking lot. She looked tired. Not physically, emotionally. Like someone who had seen too much, too quickly. Hey. Hey. We stood there for a second. Then she hugged me. Tight. Not long, but real. We walked to a bench near the edge of the base. Sat down. No rush to talk, just being there. They split up. She said it quietly. I nodded. I figured. Mom moved into a small apartment. Dad staying with a friend. A pause. Everything kind of fell apart. I didn't respond immediately, because that part wasn't something I needed to add to. Consequences don't need commentary, they just happen. She looked at me. Do you feel bad? I thought about that, honestly, then answered, no, a small beat, but I don't feel good about it either. She nodded, like that made sense, because it did. This wasn't victory, it was resolution. There's a difference. We sat there for a while. Then she said something softer. Grandma asks about you every week. I smiled slightly. I call her every Saturday. Lila nodded. Yeah, she told me. A pause. She knows everything now. I looked out across the field. Good, because that mattered more than anything else.
Not the money. Not the house. That. Truth where it actually belonged. Lila shifted slightly. I'm sorry. I looked at her. For what? For not seeing it sooner. I shook my head. You weren't supposed to. That wasn't your role. She exhaled slowly. Still, I should have asked more questions. Maybe, I said it gently. But now you know, and that's what matters. She nodded. We stayed like that for a while. Quiet. No pressure, no expectations. Just something new forming. Not what we had before. Something better. Because this time, it wasn't built on half-truths. A month later, I took a weekend trip. Drove out to a small town about 2 hours away, found a jeweler, had my mom's ring resized. Simple, gold, small stone, nothing flashy. But it fit now. That mattered. I started wearing it on my right hand. Not for anyone else. For me. A reminder. Not of what I lost, of what I chose. There's a difference. I moved the money into a separate account. Didn't rush to spend it. Didn't treat it like a win, because it wasn't. It was alignment. Something finally matching what it should have been all along. My routine went back to normal. Early mornings, training, briefings, structure. But something inside that structure had changed. Quieter, cleaner. Like a door that used to stay open, finally closed. Not slammed, just shut. I call Grandma every Saturday, same time. She answers on the second ring now. Always. We talk about small things, weather, food, stories she remembers that I don't. And sometimes, we don't talk at all. We just stay on the line, and that's enough. Lila texts me a few times a week. Nothing heavy, just normal. Work, life, questions about things she's figuring out. We're building something. Slow, real, no pressure. That's how it should be. As for Dad, he hasn't called. Not once. Angela hasn't either. And I didn't reach out. Because closure doesn't always come from conversation. Sometimes it comes from acceptance. And I accepted something a long time ago. Blood is not a contract. It's a starting point. What comes after that is choice. Repeated. Over time. And when those choices stop aligning with who you are, you don't force it. You adjust. That's what I did. Not dramatically, not loudly, just correctly. I was sitting on my bed one evening, a few weeks after everything settled, looking at the ring, catching the light from the lamp. Thinking about all of it, the call, the table, the meeting, the fundraiser, the silence after. And I realized something simple. The hardest part wasn't standing up. It wasn't speaking out. It wasn't even walking away. The hardest part was stopping the habit of accepting less than I deserved. Once that stopped, everything else followed. So let me ask you something. If you were in my place, at what point would you have drawn the line? At the text? At the table? Or much earlier? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story felt familiar in any way, if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and telling the truth, then you already know. Peace built on silence isn't peace. It's delay. And eventually, everything delayed comes due. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. There's another story waiting for you, and I think it's going to hit just as close.